This is Rob Lamothe from Cross Country Driver, and you're listening to the Brutally Delicious podcast.
One, two, three, four. The Brutally Delicious podcast. The Brutally Delicious podcast. The Brutally Delicious podcast. The Brutally Delicious podcast.
I'm always surrounded by guitars. Jesus.
That's all right. So we'll jump right in then. Thanks. Like I said, thanks for joining me. For those not familiar, as I was not until I got this from John, can you give me the 2-sentence boardroom pitch for cross country driver?
Well, let's see. It's cross-generational, cross-continental kind of journey back through my family stories and imaginings, probably. How's that?
That works. I've only heard A Man with No Direction. Absolutely love it. It's kind of got that organic, heavy Americana vibe to it, and I really loved it. Oh,
that's really interesting you say that, because that was our starting point. I don't know if we put it in those words, but when James Harper first reached out to me, we talked about like Allman Brothers and Archangels and Badlands.
Right.
But we also talked about like James Taylor and, kind of my earlier kind of singer-songwriter influences.
When you mentioned Badlands, are we talking about the Jake E. Lee Badlands?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God. One of my favorite bands ever.
Ray is for sure one of my top 3 like rock singers ever, for sure. And then Jake is... we grew up in the same city of San Diego, and we were in kind of rival bands. And
I think he's criminally underrated.
Agreed. Yeah, honestly. And I saw him play with Badlands live a bunch of times.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And like, they just killed it. Ray nailed every note that I ever heard him do. And Jake just on fire. What a like blues riff master on guitar. Wow. And so far beyond blues. I mean, that's almost...
Oh, yeah.
But,
when I name, my top favorite guitarist, if anybody ever asks, he's always in that list. And it surprises a lot of people, but I think he's very criminally underrated.
I completely agree. He got known playing with Ozzy. And, he's one of the best guitar players ever. He would be in probably my top 5.
Stuff was good. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, the guy's a killer. Yeah. Just a killer, yeah.
Sorry, I'm off on a tangent. I didn't mean to get you off of cross country driver, but...
Yeah, no, just it's interesting the way you sort of sum that up and ask me for the 2-minute pitch or the 2-sentence pitch. And yeah, sort of, starting in that Americana, but then it just got heavier. I asked my son, who's a killer drummer, who's on, I think, 8 or 9 out of the 13. I think he's on 9 out of the 13 songs on this cross country driver record. And he, when we were developing the songs, I invited him in just here in my little studio at home, and the songs just got way heavier from there. I wish you heard more of the songs, because there's a new single came out yesterday called Rio Tularosa. Mm-hmm. Which actually has Mike Mangini from Dream Theater on drums.
Oh, nice.
And it's another kind of heavier. I mean, we only get so heavy. I don't think we're heavy metal as far as I know.
No, I'd say heavy music, maybe, not heavy metal.
I'm with you on that. Yes.
So you mentioned guest appearances. I can't let this go without probably one of my favorite musicians and the nicest guy I've ever met in my life, Mr. Doug Pinnick. How did he get involved in this? Doug is the best.
Oh my God. It's funny. I'll tell you how he got involved. But first, if I could just tell you, like, when he sent us his bass tracks, it was like, oh, there's something wrong with these tracks. Like, they don't sound like anything we've ever heard. Like, both James and I, we both said that.
Right.
We were going to like lay them into our tracks with, drums and vocals and guitars. We sent him all that stuff, and I sent him all the lyrics so he could join in on harmonies if he wanted to, and he did, which was so great. But then when we laid the bass into the track, then it was like, oh, that's the tone. But on its own, it sounds so unusual. And we were like, is this unusual in a good way? But as soon as you laid it in with drums and guitars, the guy's a master.
Yeah,
he knows what he's doing. Yeah.
And
so,
again, I'm going to use the same word, criminally underrated.
Yeah, I
King
agree.
should have been huge.
Oh my gosh, yeah, agreed. And that, that band's such a huge influence on so many
everybody, right?
So many players, so many singers, writers, yeah, so many bands.
I mean, one of my favorite albums of all times is Gretchen Goes to Nebraska.
Yeah. Just a wild concept album.
Yes. Anyway, going back to how you got him involved. I'm sorry.
So no problem. So when James and I first started talking about, so first of all, I was contacted by this guy James Harper, who I didn't know, in the heading into the pandemic times and knowing that I wasn't going to be doing as much in my studio, with bringing people in to record, and this guy reaches out to me. Hey, can I send you some song ideas? You want to maybe record a couple of songs? And I was like, oh, sure, send them to me. And then I really liked what he sent me. And it was mostly like acoustic guitar, kind of Americana, kind of strummy, but then with some cool riffs. I like the way this guy plays acoustic guitar. And then, flash to a couple of years forward, and it's a much heavier record than that first stuff he sent me. But he said, he said, hey, I know that some good players and some good people, and James said, I know some good players and people. Maybe we could get some guest people in to play drums and bass and keyboards and stuff. And yeah, I don't know how he had that connection to Doug, but that was one of the names he mentioned when we were kind of starting to listen to some other music and talk about music that we loved. And we did, again, it was, Badlands, King's X, of the kind of newer stuff.
Right.
And then, like I said, Allman Brothers, Archangels. I don't know if you remember that band from Texas. It was two of the guys that were in Stevie Ray Vaughan's band, the drummer and the bass player. And then it was Doyle Bramhall, who now plays with Clapton and Roger Waters, and he's a killer singer. And then Charlie Sexton was the other guitar player singer. Kind of, I don't want to call it an all-star band, but a ridiculously talented band. Right. And so those were kind of our starting points. But we did talk about if we could get anybody to play, who would we get? And we talked about Mike Mangini, who James thought he could get a hold of because he's got friends in common, and and then we talked about Greg Chason from Badlands, who we got on a couple songs.
Right.
And and Doug Pinnick. And it ended up we got everybody, Vivian Campbell from my old band, the River Dogs, was somebody else we talked about, a great singer and a great guitar player. Like, how can we bring these people in? And Rhonda Smith, who was playing with Jeff Beck just up until Jeff Beck just passed away. Right. Bass player. She played on a couple of songs. And
just a few names. Yeah.
So, it was like our wish list kind of. And I've made a couple of records. I learned a bunch of years ago that, if you ask people quite often, if the music's good,
right,
they'll be interested. And I don't know if we've, over those years, I don't know if I've ever, I don't reach out to everybody that just pops into my mind, but right. And you meet a lot of people when you're making records and when you're playing and all that, and I've been in it for a long time. So,
right.
Yeah, we have some friends and then friends of friends, and we got to really make the record we kind of dreamed of in those first conversations.
That's great.
Yeah.
So, record comes out on March 17th. You guys planning on doing anything live with it?
We've let the label know that we're up for live performances. I've got another album that I co-produced and I play guitar on, and that comes out March 24th. Oh, wow. And that's for an amazing singer named Logan Stotts. It's Staats. And he's here based just up the river from me, actually, up the Grand River, about 45 minutes. But his record's coming out, and we've already got we got a bunch of shows lined up, so that'll probably be my spring into summer. Hey there, little pooch.
Sorry, they're usually pretty quiet, and they have been all day.
Yeah, no, I know how that is. But anyway, my spring, summer, and fall is going to be doing a bunch of festivals in Canada, and some touring that are kind of in discussion right now. So, but I imagine that, if Frontiers says, "Hey, do you want to do this festival in Europe and this other festival a week later," that we would say yes and build some shows in between
Right.
in between those two things. So that's the kind of thing that could happen. I mean, I'm super busy. I work for a film and television production company, and that keeps me super busy nowadays.
Right.
But, hey, I'm part of 2 records that I'm really proud of right now, and just going to see where it all goes. So yeah, there's nothing that would limit us doing some shows. If there was something cool that came up, we were like, yeah, that fits. That fits
Right.
into the schedule,
I guess it
right?
has to make sense, though, right? Because touring got to be extremely difficult nowadays, as opposed to the way it was.
Yeah, and the truth is it's expensive.
Right.
Like that's the other thing. I mean, it's great. You can get amplifiers and guitars in other countries. Like,
Right.
I have a couple of endorsements that are really helpful as far as that. But it's still expensive. It's just expensive to get anywhere, and it's not like James is in Boston on the East Coast. I'm above Buffalo here, and Xander, my son, who played drums on the record, he's about an hour from me in a big city called Hamilton. But I think it's probably the best chance is the scenario I laid out, which was if there was a festival, and Frontiers has a couple of their own that they put on, right? So if there was something that they were doing, they were like, yeah, we'd love to get you here, and then we could build some gigs around
Right.
a festival or two, then I think that would be the most likely scenario. No one's going to make a bunch, like we're not going to make any money doing that kind of touring.
Right.
It's not really about that anymore. It's about like, can you sell some CDs, some T-shirts, some hats? I've made more money, in the last 10 years. Like when I haven't been to Europe since 2018, but I come back with more money. It's not a boatload of money, but I've done better in the last decade than previously because, well, for one thing, I had a band based in the Netherlands, and so I didn't have to fly a whole band over. So you find ways to do it, and then if you can, I've now got a guy that I work with who's my tour manager and basically tour promoter he's in the Netherlands, but he connects me, in the UK and in Germany, et cetera. And so, we got a small little kind of business going where he's working the T-shirts and the the special edition, limited edition CDs, and while I'm up there playing, and then I come home with a little bit of money, which is amazing. And when I was on a major label with River Dogs, you get some great advances back in those days, the early 90s. We got, merchandising advances, and I got publishing advances and all that. But then we never made any money as a band. It was just, Vivian, the guitar player, had like giant, racks of guitar things that had to get shipped everywhere, like guitar, rigs that are huge. They're 6 feet tall. And like that costs a lot of money to move that kind of stuff around. So, now you got to be a little more fluid, a little more light on your feet. And
well, I mean, it makes it easier too with all those the new technology as well, like the modelers.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's a whole other world. And I've got this amazing handmade boutique amp. A guy in British Columbia, Canada, made it for me a couple of years ago, and it's amazing, and it's beautiful. I'm just looking at it right now. It's 35 watts, and it's like, God, it's such a great amp. I've played on so many recordings now with it, but like, I wouldn't want to ship that thing across the ocean, I want to keep it here. I don't even think I want to do local gigs with it anymore. I was thinking about that the other day because it's just, it's
too special.
Yeah, Yeah, and just to cart something like that around, like kind of a once in a lifetime amplifier, I think I'm going to just keep it at home now and use it for recordings. But yeah, the technology with the those amp modelers and cabinet modelers, and the way they can model the effects now, I mean, it's crazy. It's insane. It's wild. So I've got a just in the last couple of months, I've got a Fractal Audio FM3.
Yeah.
And geez, the number of possibilities, I'll never even be able to even check out all the possibilities of what I could do with it. But it's like this big. It's like
you just carry it on the plane with you.
Literally, get a little soft case for it. No, here's my rig.
So earlier you mentioned that you guys are, geographically apart from each other. How did that play into the recording? Were you ever able to get into the studio together and write, or was it mostly technology?
The writing all happened virtually, and it was great because James, when he was sending me these ideas, there wasn't verses or choruses. It was just kind of parts, 3 or 4 or 5 parts. And I said, hey, can I chop these up and can I decide that this is the verse or this is the chorus and it might not be what you were thinking? He's like, oh yeah, sure. So that was really great because then we could, I could try some stuff out and sing to it and send it to him, and he could let me know what he thinks. And then I could bring in Xander on drums, and then we could stand with, me on electric guitar and him on the drums, and we just look at each other. We got our headphones, and then we really kind of arrange these parts into songs with doing that in the same room together. I don't think it would be the same if I hadn't been able to spend all that time developing those arrangements with a drummer.
Right. And I think you're right. And we've talked about this a lot on the show. I think there's a sort of organic, maybe more honest kind of recording that comes out of that, where you're in the pockets and a little bit of sway here and there, as opposed to, well, let me get this right with, my digital whatever.
Yeah, which is so easy to do. I've been using Pro Tools since 2000, right? So I'm 23 years into it. It's just, I don't even think about what I'm doing. I'm doing all these shortcuts and I don't even realize I'm doing them, right? But also, it's so easy to get everything to a grid that and that you can save time. Then I could save, Xander coming out here with his driving out here an hour, setting up his drums. We mic'd everything up.
However, if you did that, this sort of music, especially I think this sort of organic sort of music, would suffer from it if you had it too.
I agree. Yeah, that's why I hadn't really kind of thought of this, but I don't know that we would have even ended up making a record if I couldn't have spent that time with a drummer in the room rocking out. Right.
But I talked to a lot of people that definitely don't do that at all. I mean, there's a trend where, they're clear across the globe and just sending stuff back and forth. Yeah.
And the thing is, when Xander and I got together, we did on just about every song. Then it gave me, then I played differently, obviously, with a drummer in the room, and we weren't playing to a click. And I was just quickly figuring out what the guitar chords were that James had started with, because I don't, I didn't write a lot of the music on this, right? I was mostly utilizing his great ideas. Mm-hmm. But then I would just learn my simple version of his guitar thing, and then Xander and I would just rock out. And then we could feel where it flows and where it goes. And he and I, we played together his whole life, literally, because he's my kid. And I mean, he's 30 now, but we would feel things in the same way. And then when that happened, I'd be like, okay, we're on the right track here, right? And then we would lay the drums down, and then it was like, okay, now we got our starting point. And then, then James would record his, final guitars, his real guitars to the drums, not to a click track, right? So are you a musician?
I played in high school and on and off here and there, but not really seriously, no.
But you've played enough to know what I'm talking about.
Yes,
obviously.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and obviously you talk to a lot of musicians.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I'm not knocking anybody. If it works for you and it fits, that's great. But I don't think that sort of model fits for every sort of genre.
I agree. And for rock, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if you can get the swagger and the swing and
The
the
realness.
yeah, that the anticipations, and then the when you're behind,
Right.
how do you get that? I don't know. Sure, someone could send me a track and I could play guitar to it, but that's not the same. Yeah, and I'm sure some people are really, really good at it. Maybe
Yeah,
it
that's
doesn't
what I'm
even
saying. And
affect
it
them.
works for some people, obviously. I mean, there's
Yeah,
people making, selling millions of records doing that, but I think
yeah,
it may be band dependent or maybe genre dependent. I don't know.
yeah, or some combination of the two. We did get to play. So maybe 2 months ago, we James drove up here from Boston, and we did the music video for A Man with No Direction.
Mm-hmm.
We did a live off the floor version of the single that came out yesterday, Rio Tularosa,
Uh-huh.
which we'll probably release in the next week or so, I think. And it's just us live off the floor with acoustic guitars.
Nice.
And Xander's playing like a djembe drum, the wooden, or no, he's playing a cajon.
Oh, okay.
No, sorry. He is playing a djembe. Sorry,
Okay.
I couldn't remember which one he used. But and then my friend Justine Fisher's on electric bass, but it's just us kind of in a circle playing. And then we also shot some interview, more like conversations between James and I about how the band got started, where we were coming from, kind of when we met up. And then the next day we did a photo shoot. So in a day and a half, we got to really spend a lot of time, James and Xander and I specifically together, and just creating, right? Because we hadn't done that all in the same room before. So
Right.
It was really great to do that. And again, it's funny because we were having this conversation. I hadn't really thought about where would this record be if I hadn't had a drummer to really find the arrangements for the songs with. And I don't know if we ever would have actually made a record, because we just started out, you want to just record a couple songs? Okay, sure.
Right.
And then it was like, we really liked, when we finished one, it was like, oh, this is great, let's do another one. And then at some point, we were just thinking, like, should we just make a record? Let's just make a record,
Right.
whatever that means nowadays. Let's make an album. And we never talked about, we did discuss maybe we'll just release it ourselves. We didn't know what we would do with it.
Right.
But I ended up sending it out to some of my friends in the music biz and people whose ears I trusted. And one of those sets of ears I trusted was Nick Teeter from Frontiers. He's like their North America. I think he's the manager for North American operations or something.
Uh-huh.
And I just said to him, hey, any suggestions? I really thought our record would be too self-indulgent, probably, for Frontiers. And like a couple of days later, we got an email from their business affairs saying, hey, we want to sign you to a record deal. And we were just kind of laughing like, oh shit. I'm sorry you haven't heard more of the album, just because I'd love to hear what you think. I went and kind of looked through some of your,
Right.
listen to some of your podcasts, and I see how you interact with musicians. That's why I thought maybe you were a player, right? So I'll be curious to maybe have a chat with you again, maybe just by email, just to get
sure.
your feeling about the record.
I think John will probably send it to me when it's he may have, I get tons of emails. I don't even get through them all. It might still be in there, but
Right.
all I had was the single for this one. And
Right.
but yeah, I dig it. So what do you guys you gonna be writing again, or continue to writing, or that sort of thing? And that's the game plan, right? Just maybe September or fall touring.
I think that's probably our most likely scenario. I always seem to, quite often I've ended up in Europe in like October, November.
Mm-hmm.
That just seems to be when the gigs are over there. I've never thought that out loud before, but it's kind of true. But so knowing that because in Canada, where are you?
I'm in Richmond, Virginia.
Oh, okay. So I'm up here, 50 minutes north of Buffalo, and
Right.
and touring, can really be precarious in the winter up here, right? And
I imagine so.
where you can't get from one city to the next because of the weather. So I imagine with Logan, we'll probably again we're going to start playing shows the 19th of March, and then I imagine we'll be pretty busy and heading into fall.
Right.
And then that might be the time that maybe a trip to Europe is going to make sense, which is probably where Cross Country Driver would go, if anywhere, because.
And that makes sense too, right? Because Frontiers is they're pretty much based over there, right?
Yeah, they're based in Milan, Italy. Yeah, that's kind of there. And most of my career, the vast majority of my career has been in Europe. I've probably toured over there probably close to 30 times now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, people don't know, like people in Canada, they don't know me as like, they know me as, well, I'm pretty unknown here, but they might know me for, playing some guitar for Logan. I've been playing with him for about 6 years. And my son is the drummer in that band as well, which is very convenient.
Yeah.
But I've probably been playing with him for 7 years.
Wow.
But I haven't really kind of pursued my own thing here because Europe has always been there for me. And by Europe, I mean really, well, the UK, which is now not part of
not Europe, right?
right. But, Spain and Sweden and Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands, those are kind of my go-tos over many, many trips. So
right.
That's kind of been my real musical base, actually. So that's the most, because Frontiers is also based in Italy, then it makes sense that would be the most likely.
Right. And I think they do festivals too. I think they have their own festivals as well, don't they?
They do, yeah. And Cross Country Driver, it's like the River Dogs, like we did more in Europe as well, as far as kind of catching on over there. And that's why River Dogs never did a US tour. Even with our first album, it was so expensive then to tour.
I think that's historically been the case, though, right? In the heavy music scene, maybe not heavy metal exclusively, but the heavy scene does always better there in like South America, more so than it does here in the US.
For some reason, yeah. It's tough, man. If a band wants to like tour, they got to be, I'm not talking about Metallica, but like they got to have money behind them, or they got to be ready to. And my son Xander has done it with his bands since he was a teenager. 5 guys driving and sleeping in the van with the equipment, like a 12-passenger van, and sleeping on people's floors. That's how they've toured.
Yeah.
That's it. There's no glamour.
No. It's not like the mid 80s when everybody was in a tour bus and selling out everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. That was a different world then.
That is all I've got. Did I miss anything you want to cover?
No, this is great. I mean, for a guy that has just heard the one song, this is a great conversation. So thank you for that. You're good at this.
Thank you. I've been doing it for a while. I enjoy it, and and it's real. I kind of do it because I enjoy the music and I enjoy discovering new stuff and finding new people and just chatting. Right? I mean,
amazing.
We talked about Cross Country Driver maybe a little bit, but we were just talking. And I think
yes, exactly.
The best. It's just a conversation. And while I do have notes, we didn't touch on half of it because it's more real, I guess.
Yeah, organic. You've used that word.
I don't want to keep using the same word again, but yes. Yeah.
Cheers, man.
Cheers.
That was great. Thank you, Bruce.
Awesome. Yep. Be well.
I want to chat with you when you've heard the album.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Awesome. Be well, my friend. Thank you for taking the time.
Hey, thank you so much for the opportunity, Bruce.
Cheers.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.